Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is the most mysterious paranormal thing you've ever witnessed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Scariest moment of my life happened while my friend and I were camping in eastern Canada as teenagers. We decided to sleep in this abandoned camper we found deep in a large forest that was near our town. It had been there so long that small trees had grown around it. We'd stumbled across it when we were exploring a few months back and thought it would be cool and brave to sleep there for a night. So, one weekend we did it. We arrived after dark because we had gotten lost trying to find the camper. We had a really low power flashlight, so it made it even more difficult. Once we finally found it, we opened the rusty door and stepped in. The sounds inside the camper were shrill and echoey. There were typical camper things strewn about: cups, empty cans, swollen Pulp Fiction novels. Already tired, we holed up in one end of the camper where the bed area had originally been before the cushions had rotted away to almost nothing. A long hallway stretched the length of the camper so we could basically see from end to end. It was a miserable night. There were several rats living in there. I saw them staring at us from a chewed out part of the ceiling. When the wind blew outside, the camper would shriek and groan. We even thought we heard a bear outside too, walking around. Still, we feigned bravery and acted like we were having a good time, but we were on edge. At some point, I woke up from an uncomfortable sleep. I sat up to adjust myself when I noticed some movement out of the corner of my eye. At the other end of the camper, there was a small window, and as I looked at it, I saw a man's silhouette. He was clearly staring straight at me from outside. At first, I thought maybe it was a weird shape of a tree or something. But when I moved a bit to get a better look, the person clearly reacted and then froze. My heart was pumping, and I woke up my friend immediately saying, "Someone's here," over and over and over in a whisper, not taking my eyes off of his profile. He woke up immediately, and I nodded towards the window. He saw him too. We whispered frantically about who it could be and why he was staring at us, and for the next 10 minutes, no joke, we stared him down. The longer we stared at him, the more frightened we got. Occasionally he would move, but always keeping his eyes locked on us. Eventually I shouted at him, "Hey!" No reaction. My friend was braver than me and decided to shine the flashlight at him. As soon as he did, we realized our horrible mistake. It wasn't a window at all on the other side of the camper. It was a mirror. We'd been staring down ourselves from the very start. Completely idiotic. Still, it was the most fearful, relieving, and funny moment of my life that I'll never forget it. Closest to paranormal I've ever been. Not me, but my dad. When he was younger, he used to see a woman in a white nightdress holding a candelabra walking along the hallway at his old house. No one ever believed him, but he thought it was his grandmother. Fast forward 20 plus years and he's talking to someone he works with. This girl says she used to see a woman in a white nightdress holding a candelabra in her old house. My dad asks where she used to live, and it was his old house. Spooky. I saw a shadow person once. I didn't know that's what it was called until much later. I was living in a house in Laguna Beach that had been there since the 1920s. In its history, it had been a speakeasy, a brothel, and a house for smuggling illegal immigrants. One day, my new wife and I were having an argument. I can't even recall what it was about. She walked down the block to get a cup of coffee and cool off, and I was alone in the house. The way the place was built was incredibly haphazard. There was a bedroom and living room on one side, then a bathroom with two entrances. One on the other side of the bathroom was a hallway that had windows on one side and two bedrooms on the other. From my bedroom, I could look across the hall into the bathroom, then through the bathroom and down the other hall. I was standing at my dresser, and I just noticed movement out of the corner of my eye and looked down there. There was, and honest to God, this gives me goosebumps just typing it, 17 years later, a black figure. It was maybe 3 feet tall, and it was only vaguely humanoid. It looked like black scribbles, like someone had scribbled a human shape, but the scribbles moved, like electricity, arcing. That's the best way to describe it. There was no sound that I could remember. I distinctly remember when I saw it, I wasn't afraid, just like, what the F? Then, it noticed me looking at it. I can't say it turned around, it just focused on me, I guess. Then, I was scared. I didn't move, didn't scream, nothing. I was just frozen. because it just effing came at me. It rushed down the hall towards me. I have no idea what it intended, but as soon as it entered the bathroom, the door closest to me just slammed shut on it. Then I screamed. I yelled for my wife. She wasn't home. I went the F outside into the daylight and didn't go back in until she got home about 10 minutes later. I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe I saw something supernatural, but I know I saw something. I don't know what it was. Okay, assuming what you saw actually did happen, that you end that story by saying you don't believe in the paranormal or ghosts, I think you should believe. We used to live in a very old house that my dad's great-grandparents had raised their kids in. Out of 9 children, only 4 lived to adulthood, all dying in the house along with this great-grandfather. Needless to say, the place was creepy as shit. We could never keep blinds up in the upstairs window that faced east. Grandma said that her dad would always look out the window with his coffee in the morning. One day, my mom and I were alone in the house and decided to do an experiment. We closed all the curtains in the upstairs room and then went outside to look at them. All the curtains were still closed except for the one in the window pointing east. It was open about 6 inches in the middle, enough for someone to look out of. I'm not saying that house was haunted, but that shit was totally haunted. So this is a story from my family. When my mom was a young girl growing up in Vietnam, she had this weird dream about being in a darkened church. Everyone was talking in hushed tones, but it was English, so she didn't understand what was going on. But she remembered certain details, like the stained glass windows and the baptismal font. She told her parents, but they were kind of dismissive. They just told her it was a weird dream. A few years later, she was forced to flee South Vietnam because of the Vietnam War. Her family relocated to Florida, and they started their life over. About 10 years later, she went to the local Catholic church for her younger sister's confirmation. And suddenly, she realized it was the same church she had dreamed of as a child. The same darkened church, the same stained glass, and the same baptismal font. She talked to her parents again, and they remembered her having the dream and describing the place exactly. Maybe some of it is altered memory, but it's one of our family legends. A few years ago, my best friend and I moved into a rent house. It was definitely a weird house, and I got some weird vibes out of it. Every night when I went to sleep, I would hear music. Not singing, just music. Like someone had a distant radio on, and not any song I could ever name. I had dreams every night of a crowd of faceless people with a little boy standing in front. He never spoke, but I could tell he was trying to tell me something. The fridge would often open on its own, and the cats would hiss at corners and such. We could smell cigarette smoke coming from the wall in the back room at 3 o'clock every day. My aunts were, still are, big into ghost hunting, so they set up cameras in my house one night. We didn't catch much, but one of the cameras was spun in circles for about 15 seconds, and at 3 in the morning, the front porch light turned itself on and got really bright and then faded off. When I moved out of the house after 2 years, I had trouble sleeping because I didn't have the music anymore. It was definitely a strange house. My great-grandpa told me this one. One time, when he was younger, he went to go visit some old friends and their daughter. He arrives on horse. He was a rancher in Texas. The little girl walks up to him and says, "Hi, Paul. I'll take your horse. Dinner is ready. You can go in and sit down." So he walks inside and sits at the table. The parents walk up to him and say, "Hi, who let you in?" He says, "Your daughter took my horse. She said I could come in." They looked horrified. She's been dead for 6 months. TLDR. I saw a little girl staring at me from the second story of an abandoned mental hospital. Long version. Me and some buddies were bored one night and decided to head out and poke around an abandoned mental hospital. The only way in was through the autopsy room. The rest of the place was pretty much sealed off. So we go in, me, another guy, and 2 girls. As soon as we get into the autopsy room, one of the girls starts hyperventilating and crying. She said she just couldn't be there anymore. We tried everything we could to convince her everything was going to be fine, to no avail. She wanted to leave, and wanted to leave now. Disappointed, we decided we had to leave. The 2 girls were walking in front of us, one trying to comfort the other, while me and the other dude walked a bit of a way behind. I don't know what brought me to look back, morbid curiosity maybe, but I did. Now, I'll admit it was dark, but the moon was out so it wasn't pitch black. Still, I know what I saw. A window on the second floor, what looked just like a little girl in a white dress staring back at us. I looked for a good 10 seconds, stopped my buddy, and had him look without taking my eyes off the thing, and asked him specifically, "Do you effing see that?" I thought I may have been seeing things, or maybe it was a trick of the light. But no, we both saw it and stared at it for a good 20 seconds after. I might have thought it was some kind of trick, but after 20 seconds or so, it moved. We noped the F out of there, passing the girls and screaming at them to get in the car. Is it possible it could have been some other people there who happened to bring a girl who might have looked from a distance to be a lot younger than she was? Yes. There were no other cars around though, so whoever it was would have had to walk a pretty good distance to get there. It could have also been a homeless family that was using the place for warmth, who knows? All I know is what I saw. It was a little girl in a white dress staring at us from the second-story window of an abandoned mental joint at 2 in the goddamn morning. I'm sure there are plenty of things or reasons why this could be a hoax or meant to fake you out, but fake or real, that would be pretty unsettling. Went to pick up my daughter from a dance on the waterfront. I was early, so I walked near the lake. I saw something very bright, not moving, at about 20 degrees up. Sirius was at about 40 degrees that night. Then I looked down and saw a pure white coyote walking along the water's edge. Even though I purposefully made a lot of noise so as not to startle the coyote, it didn't acknowledge I was there. I looked back at the star, which was still not moving, but suddenly went from exceptionally bright dimming down to nothing. I looked back to the coyote and it was gone too, although it was very dark at night. This all happened at 12:30 a.m. The next morning I woke up to a phone call telling me my best friend had died in Norway. He died at 6:30 a.m. local time, 12:30 a.m. my time. About 20 years ago, I was T-boned on the passenger side of my car by a drunk driver who ran a red light. I went flying across the intersection and my car was stopped by slamming driver's side into a utility pole. I don't remember being hit. I only remember someone helping me out of the broken window. My car was absolutely totaled, and I did not have a scratch, bruise, or sore muscle to remember the accident by. When the police showed up, they did not believe that I was in the car crash and had to rely on witnesses to attest to the fact that they helped me out. I sometimes think I was somehow protected by something I don't understand, and that I was to go on to accomplish something major in my life. Then I get a little sad, because I don't really think I accomplished that. Not me, but my aunt, a woman who was, to my knowledge, has never told me an untruth. Around Easter time, many years ago, the family was eagerly awaiting her grandma, my great-grandma, to arrive to celebrate with them. She was due Friday. Thursday night, after everyone had went to bed, my aunt was woken by a hand on her shoulder. She looked up and, much to her surprise, saw Grandma smiling down at her. All Grandma said was that she was very, very sorry for not being able to be there for Easter. She wished my aunt a good night and said she was glad she got to see her before she went. My aunt thought nothing of it and went back to bed. The next morning, they got the phone call that Grandma had passed away in her sleep the previous night. Not witnessed, but happened to me. When I was in high school, I dated this marvelous girl. She was charming, sweet, and had the perfect smile. Sadly, she got in an ATV accident and passed away due to head trauma. This destroyed me, and I was a wreck. But exactly a week later, if I recall correctly, I got an email from her saying that she was so excited to hang out with me that summer. It strangely made me feel better. I don't know if that message was in the drafts folder for X amount of time and then automatically sent, but I was happily surprised that somehow she spoke to me after her passing. I also got a text message from her phone that week, but no one had touched the phone since she had passed. Her parents and brother wouldn't go in her room. My father passed away last year. One item he always said he wanted me to have was a shotgun which had originally belonged to his grandfather. For years, he had this shotgun stashed in the attic. After he passed, I had gone to the attic to look for it, only to find that it wasn't there. A few months later, I had a dream in which I was talking to him and I asked him where he had put the shotgun. He told me it was in the closet of a spare bedroom. I called my mother and had her check, and sure enough, that's where it was. Now, it's completely possible that my father had told me that when he was alive, and the dream was little more than a memory, but I certainly don't recall that being the case.
Whether your father came to you in a dream or it was a repressed memory, that it happened was enough to keep him in your thoughts, and that's good enough.
My mom always bought snow globes for my grandma. When my grandma passed away, my mom took them back to our house. My mom put them all up on the shelves that go around the entire living room. A few weeks had passed and my mom found a video that she wanted my brothers and I to watch because it reminded her of our grandma. We all sat down to watch it, and of course, near the end of the movie, our mom was crying. Right when the movie ends, all of the snow globes went off at the same time. The figurines didn't move on any of them, just the music. We all huddled together, of course, because we're scared as F, and my mom suddenly said, "Mom?" And all the music stopped, and then the room became extremely cold. My mom suddenly felt really uncomfortable and had all of us run and get into the car, and she drove us to our godmother's house. She cried for hours until she got a call from our dad saying he'd be home in a few minutes and should head back. When we all got back inside, it was warm again, but all the snow globes were shattered on the ground except for one. The one that was my grandma's favorite. My mom grew up in a rural part of Guatemala where witchcraft was a real thing and has so many stories of the weird shit she and her brothers and sisters experienced there. Of all the stories she tells, the creepiest one deals with a young apprentice to a witch doctor who traveled around the country healing people. He was murdered west of Guatemala City, and they had arranged to bring his body back to be buried there. They paid bottom dollar to have some poor bastard go pick up the body and bring it back in his pickup truck. The guy gets there, loads the coffin on his truck, and starts heading back. But his truck breaks down on the way. He gets out and frantically tries to get the truck back on the road, as he has to be back in time for the services to start. He's completely alone in the dark hours of the early morning, and a man in a nice suit comes from out of nowhere to help him out. The man gets his truck back in working order and walks back down the road into the darkness. The guy gets the body back in time, and after some prep, they begin the services. He happens to walk by the open coffin to pay his respects and sees that the dead man in the coffin is the very same man who had helped him with his truck. To this day, I get shivers thinking about it.